My name is Eitan Chatayat, and welcome to I'm That podcast, where I get to talk to some pretty incredible people. Some are friends and colleagues, some are clients, and some are people I haven't even met yet. On I'm That, we'll hear from them about who they are, what they do and why, stuff they love or hate, mistakes they've made, victories they've had. They're all known for something, but by the time we're through, the hope is they'll have revealed some things we didn't know about them. Our talk may be deep, profound, funny, who knows really. One thing for sure, it'll be interesting and honest. So if you're up for that, thank you for joining me on I'm That, and here we go. Marnie Perlstein is an anti-Semitism advocate from Sydney, Australia. Her first career was in communications and corporate and consumer PR, but she then pivoted into her next one and became the marketing manager at Mount Scopus College in Melbourne, and then the development manager for the Board of Jewish Education in Sydney. She's a totally committed and passionate member of the Sydney Jewish community and has been working to connect organizations, individuals, and programs in the common goal of fighting anti-Semitism since 2021. Post-October 7th, she started talking online, accidentally growing from 1,000 followers to over 33,000 followers. Hey, Marnie.
Hey, Eitan.
So full disclosure, we're friends.
We are friends.
We're friends and you're here in Tel Aviv, and we just thought, you know what, fuck it, let's do this.
Let's talk.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
The funny thing about this podcast is that I typically open up with a question, and all you need to do really is complete the sentence. So I'm going to ask you the question, just complete the sentence, and we'll just take it from there. So please complete the sentence. Marnie Perlstein, I'm that
loud and proud Jewish woman who feels in every essence of my being that we all need to be the same on some level. I'm the person that is like literally shaking the shoulders of everyone around me saying, this is how we need to be right now.
Wow. Well, how do we need to be right now?
We need to be proud of who we are, and we need to talk about who we are, and we need to show the world who we are, because most people in the world have never met a Jewish person. So they're relying on misinformation to define us. They don't know from personal experience what we stand for.
That's insane. You know, when you say that, I never really stopped to think about that, but it's true. I remember once, you know, one of the funniest things that ever happened to me, Marnie, is I was in a McDonald's and in Boston, and the woman who was, I think, Jamaican, a big, lovely black lady, so friendly, radiant, she looked at me and she goes, I love your accent. Where are you from? And I said, I'm from Israel. And she went into shock. And she said she'd never met a Jew before. Or had a conversation with a Jew before, and we started talking there at the McDonald's, and she ended up giving me a free Big Mac meal because I was Jewish.
It's good for something.
Yeah, but yeah, there are only 16 million of us.
There's only 16 million of us in a world of billions. Mm-hmm. So we have to assume that the majority of people out there really know nothing about us and understand less than nothing about us.
So what... So the aim of this isn't to talk to just the Jewish community. It's actually a lot of non-Jewish followers. So I know, who are we?
We are a kick-ass, awesome, small but strong group of people who are passionate about our survival, passionate about our beliefs, and passionate about getting the world to know us better. Well, some of us are passionate about that, but more of us should be.
I mean, is that something that you... Because, you know, I read out your bio, but like how has being Jewish played such an important role in your life, and why? I mean, is that something by accident or because of anti-Semitism, or just you just brought up to be proud? And
I firstly think that because I am the granddaughter of two Polish Australian immigrants who left Poland just before the war, and they met each other on the boat coming to Australia. So I was always aware that my grandparents were from Europe and had had to leave Europe because of the Holocaust. That had a big effect on me, and it's actually only in the last couple of years that I found out that my grandfather was one of 7 children and left Poland on his own and lost 3 of his siblings in the Holocaust. So I think somewhere in my bones or in my DNA, I've always felt this incredible responsibility to focus on my Judaism because of their history, my grandparents' history.
Are you a practicing Jew?
I'm not a religious Jew, but I'm quite a traditional Jew.
I think that's also funny for people who don't know the Jewish people so well. Like, you can be very, very Jewish and absolutely not religious, or you can be very, very religious and not be Jewish. But it's more than religion, right?
Well, it's an ethnicity, it's a culture, we're a tribe. We're literally a tribe of people, and we all, I think everyone sort of displays and shows their Judaism in a million different ways. None of us is exactly the same. That's also what's really confusing for non-Jewish people, because we all present so differently that it's hard to know really what we're about.
Yeah. When I was in the States, I was living in the States for 13 years when I was in advertising, and people would say, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "Well, I was born in Israel." And they'd look at the color of my skin, because I'm not white. I'm not black, but I'm not white. I'm like brown. And they'd say, like, "What's your heritage?" And I said, "Well, my father is from Iraq and my mother is Bulgarian." And then you talked about your Polish heritage, and there are people from Spain. There are people from, we've been around,
We've been around, and I mean, firstly, people don't understand that. And even if they did, the saddest thing is that they don't understand why we've been around. And I think that, to me, is such an interesting discussion when it comes to the Jewish people, our ancestral ties to Israel, the fact that we were sort of booted out of the land twice after the destruction of 2 temples and spent thousands of years wandering around the world, and then came back 75 years ago is like the most insane story. We've really been around.
Yeah. I think that we came back is always kind of like misunderstood. People think that there were no Jews here, and there have always been Jews here. And also, before what is now known as the Palestinian people were here, we were also here. And there's always been a presence here. And unfortunately, because of the fact that our narrative has been hijacked, which we're now starting to fight back for, a lot of people just think that we came back after 2,000 years, and understandably, they're just like, well, you can't just come back after 2,000 years and just reclaim the land. And people don't know that we have kind of always been here. And also, the people that were here were not exactly, they weren't exactly kind of like living in cities, and it wasn't a populated country, and you didn't have, it was pretty barren and desolate.
Well, I think people don't understand that. And then they also don't understand that when we, officially came back in terms of given land by the United Nations, that it was the shittiest land here, and we accepted it. And there've always been Jewish people in the state, in this land. But I think a lot of Jewish people don't understand our own narrative, let alone non-Jewish people.
No, I think we were talking about this off mics before, but talking about where we haven't done a good job, and maybe it was the last time we met, where we haven't done a good job is inwards with our community. We've assimilated so much, which is important. Like, the Jewish people do assimilate. We do want to be a part of the communities, the bigger communities in the world. But I think we've really failed as a collective in looking inwards and reminding ourselves of who we are and where we come from, the values that we have, the Jewish traditions that we have.
But I think that's because we've just lived through the golden years of being Jewish. Like, the last 80 years have been such a great time for the Jewish people that we haven't had the need in the same way to claim our own story and teach our own people what we're really about. And I think that's why it's so important now, because we're realising now, in this moment when the world's turning against us, that we really screwed up by not doing this earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Now, that's a great segue, actually, for the last thing that I read in your bio, which is like you saw your following go from 1,000 to 33,000. And it kind of started with October 7th, I imagine, for you. And I would love to hear from you about just the whole experience, maybe before, during, and where you are now, which is a big, big, big question. But a lot of us have met each other through the advocacy work that we're doing online to try and educate, try and fight for the truth, try and deliver our own narrative, our true narrative. And a lot of people, for people who don't know, were inspired and found it necessary to start speaking up very, very publicly after October 7th, and you're one of them, and that's how we met. So I'd love you to just share your story.
Well, thanks. I think I was an advocate well before October 7th, but I was not online. I was behind the scenes trying to create programs, trying to convince the schools to create a subject around advocacy, trying to get organisations to help prepare our young people in the Jewish community for university. I could see that there was a growing issue with anti-Semitism, and I'd worked in the space for a long time, but I never for a second thought I should be a front-facing person. I just thought, no, it needs to be, it's like a young person's job. But after October 7, I became so angry so quickly with the response of the media, the government and the population of Australia, which is where I live, that I just couldn't hold back anymore. And I literally pressed recorded a 30-second, it was a story, put it on there. And at that time I had 1,000 followers. They were all personal friends. I didn't think anyone would give a shit or was listening, but I had a phone call from someone who said, you know what, if you're going to do this, you need to do A, B and C. I mean, I'm a 55-year-old tech-challenged woman who has no idea.
And not only that, you once told me you're socially awkward.
I am socially awkward.
Which I don't see at all.
Well, that's because we get along.
Okay. Okay, maybe we shouldn't get along. We'll have a fight and then I'll be able to see it. No, but keep going.
I mean, seriously, for the first 4 months, I was so inept that I only knew how to record a 30-second reel. And that's the irony that I think a lot of my initial growth was because my reels were so short and so to the point that people were like, okay, that's not going to take much of my time. And it took me 4 months before I even realised that you had the potential to do a longer reel. That's how completely useless I was.
What kind of things were you saying?
I was talking a lot about things that had happened locally in Australia. On October 9th, the Sydney Opera House was going to be lit with the Israeli flag in solidarity with Israel. And on the day that was supposed to happen, it was happening in the evening, the police force in Sydney told everyone in the Jewish community to stay home because it wasn't going to be safe. So on a night where we wanted to be on the steps of our national icon in solidarity with Israel, we had to stay home because there was a really full-on pro-Palestinian rally where there were chants of gas the Jews, F the Jews, Israeli flags were burnt. And I was so furious with the response to that that I started talking a lot about that kind of stuff. I was also talking a lot about just what had happened in Israel, like just little, whatever. But actually, you know what? I was talking about whatever was new and happening on the day. And Australia's ahead of the rest of the world. So I was literally sort of staying up all night watching the news and then getting out of bed really early and reporting on what had happened overnight in 30 seconds.
So what was driving that? What was driving this fire?
The fact that I could see that no one was really talking about it. The media were misrepresenting everything. I didn't see anybody online talking about it on a regular basis. There were very, very few people.
Yeah, and let's set the context here because just for the people listening, on October 6th, there was a ceasefire. There's been ceasefire. I mean, we've been constantly having skirmishes and battles and mini wars with Hamas for decades. But there was calm. October 7th happened, around 1,500 people killed, massacred, murdered, over 240 hostages taken. This is within 24 hours. There was no Israeli troops on the ground for weeks. I think it was 2, maybe 3 weeks before we galvanized our troops. So we hadn't done anything.
That's right. And that is one of the key things that I was saying to Australians. You are out here protesting and you are throwing all this hatred at Israel, but Israel has not responded in any way. Why are you not talking about the people who were murdered in that country, the women who were raped? Why are you not talking about the hostages? Why is all the energy going into this Israel hatred? which has very quickly spewed into just complete Jew hatred in Australia.
So since then, you've been advocating, and now looking back, because we're around almost 9 months, we can look back. And what's the reason that people are doing that? Why is the world as quiet as it is? I mean, I have my opinion and what I think, but I'd love to hear from you looking back, like what's going on?
We could talk for about 4 hours just on this question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously the coordinated effort from the pro-Palestinian movement on university campuses and in the arts sectors and in left-leaning, like in woke spaces, progressive spaces. Yeah. And they've done a very, very good job at selling a story. So I think there's that. I think that, the world has been through a really rough few years, and I think COVID has had a big effect, especially in Australia where we were really locked up, like literally locked up for a couple of years. And a lot of young people in particular spent their entire existence in front of a screen, and a lot of people were really radicalised. I feel like COVID has had some big effect on what we're seeing now. And there are just so many reasons. I think, anti-Semitism has been around since the beginning of time, and there's always just a moment where people are waiting for it to rise up again and become acceptable, and then it just takes off.
Yeah, what drives me crazy about this thing is just like, why us? What did we do? What did the Jewish people do?
You know what? At the moment, I think what people see is they see a white-presenting population who are overrepresented, who are doing well in their diaspora communities, many who have made a lot of money or who have had great success, and that's certainly not the majority of Jews, but because we're such a small population globally and we've had so many successful people, it really makes people jealous and angry.
Yeah, and in a world, like you said before, a work world when, I think left progressive is there's some type of alignment, even if people don't know it, with Marxism. There's kind of like this, well, if you're successful, then it's at the expense of someone. And we're the perfect scapegoat because we are successful. We're not successful because we're successful. I think as a community, we are disproportionately more successful in many ways in certain industries. And there's resentment. And there's always kind of like throughout history, well, we've got to blame someone. We've got to blame someone for and this is the thing about anti-Semitism, which a lot of people have been talking about lately. It's like it's a virus that mutates. Like right now, we're hated because of Israel. In Second World War, Nazi Germany, we were hated because we were not the Aryan race. Then we were hated by the communists. Then we were hated because we're capitalists. Then we were hated because apparently we killed the Son of God. So I think, there's just like we're the perfect scapegoat for whatever the world's biggest problem is in the moment.
We are, and someone once, I heard this in a talk, and I thought it was so amazing. The only thing you have to do as a Jew to be the recipient of hatred is to exist in the world as a Jew, because there is so much sort of unconscious bias against Jewish people because of the tropes that have existed for so long that you just really have to just exist in the world, and people will gather this bias. It's not even their own fault, but they have a perception of us that's been around for a very long time. They don't know what the reality is because they've never met us, and so it's easier to hate us.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, people listening to this who are not Jewish might think, well, what are they complaining about? Like, and then that's our fault too. I think it's the misperception that we really are a minority. Like, we're a minority that a lot of people know about, that a lot of people have heard of, but they don't know that we're that minority. They don't know how few there are of us.
They don't know that, but also in the world that we live in right now, we're in a world that makes so much space for every single minority and that focuses on the rights of every single minority, whether it's, Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQ community, whether it's Every minority that exists is getting some kind of attention and some kind of understanding, except for the Jewish people, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. I always try and, again, it's just like, why? Why is that? That's the question. And I guess it's kind of like some of the stuff that we've been talking about.
Well, I think if you don't know us and you've never talked to us, then there's a lot you don't understand. So you may not understand, for example, that when I drop my kid at school, there are armed guards outside his school. And most Australians have no concept of that. They don't know that if I go to the synagogue, there are armed guards outside our synagogue. On our high holidays, we have lots of police patrolling the area. They don't realise that we are actually an endangered minority. Like in Australia, we make up 0.05%, 0.5% of the population, but we receive the most racial hatred out of any other group in the country.
The sad thing is, and I'll go back to I'm 52, and I grew up, I was born in Israel, but I grew up in Hong Kong and then London. And when I was in London, I went to a Jewish school. I went to JFS. And outside the school, this was in the 80s, 1984, there were 5 neighboring schools that would come to our school, students, and they would shout anti-Semitic, just abuse. They would throw stones at us. We were beaten up many times or just like roughed up. We had to have we had to have security taking us to and from the tube station. And this was in the 80s. This was around 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago. Is that correct? I don't even know the math right now. But around 40 years ago. And then you go back to, before then, 1948, 1950, you had the Farhud in Iraq, which is like the pogroms. You had the pogroms in Poland. These things, when you say pogrom, if you don't know what that is, it's basically kind of like an uprising or a violent mob kind of attack.
Like what happened in LA last week.
Yeah, or actually, no, much worse. It's like what happened on October 7th. Like in Farhud, people were murdered. In the pogroms, people were murdered. Jews were taken out of their homes and they were beaten and killed in the hundreds just because they were Jewish. And so when we see something like this happening, when we see, what you were talking about, like in Australia at the Sydney Opera House, that's scary as fuck because we as a people kind of like know where it can go.
We do know where it can go. And the scary thing is how quickly it can go there. And even, I think we've seen that in the last 9 months.
Oh yeah.
There's a level of hatred that has just been ignited so quickly. And it can go to the worst places. We've seen that in humanity.
So there's 2 things that are scary. One is that, just like the violence, the violent rhetoric, the hatred, the intolerance. To me, the scarier thing is we keep saying this, Marnie, like the silence of the world, and it's become just like this sentence. But I'm going to try and say it very slowly so that people understand the gravity. The silence of the world when people are being hated and murdered and targeted, not in a warlike situation. In a warlike situation, people are going to be killed. There's a war now. But the silence of the world when people are being targeted just for who they are is the thing that scares me the most. What are your thoughts on what, and it's a big question, of course, but like, what needs to be done about that? What can one do about that?
Firstly, I think that one reason that is even able to happen right now is because of the world we live in with social media and algorithms. And if something doesn't affect you personally or you're not interested in it, you don't even necessarily know about it. So I think a lot of people are silent purely because they don't give a shit and they don't know about it.
But before you even, there was no social media in the 40s. There was no social media when 6 million of us were killed.
That's true. That is true. So then it goes back to the idea of anti-Semitism being a virus and being viral. And I think that the
social media doesn't help, that's for sure.
No, it doesn't help, it doesn't help at all, especially in a time where people are not focused on traditional media outlets or they're not even bothered to learn facts and truth. and the media don't even help disseminate facts and truth. So I think there are a lot of issues. In terms of
the fact they're doing the opposite.
They're doing the exact opposite. They're doing the absolute opposite. And the organisations that people hold up with respect and regard, like the UN, don't deserve that respect. So the world is listening to people and organisations that are not saying the right things, and that's a huge problem. There's just this spread of misinformation. The big question, I guess, is can we counter that misinformation that's getting out there, being such a small percentage of the world's population and seemingly having so few allies? I do think that we have allies. I mean, everyone talks about the silent majority, and I wish they'd speak up. I do think a lot of people get it, but they don't know where to talk and how to talk about it, and they're scared. I think the other thing we have now is, which has always been a thing in one form or another, is cancellation. People are really scared of losing work, being cancelled.
That's a really good point. I want to bring up something that happened recently, which we can, there's no real agenda here besides just this conversation and getting to know each other. But you remember, not long ago, I don't know when the podcast is going to come out, but, Ben Stiller spoke up. And there's a lot of people within the Jewish community that are literally hating on Jewish celebrities, Jewish people with a large following who are household names who have not spoken up. But he spoke up online, and he spoke about October 7th. He spoke about the fact that the hostages need to come home. He spoke about anti-Semitism and how it's awful. He spoke about innocent Palestinians being killed. But he made it very, very clear about where he stands. He might not have said exactly what every gung-ho Jewish advocate or person at home would have wanted to hear, and he might have come a little bit late to the party, but he did come out and he did say it. And that issue of cancellation is it's pretty scary. It's pretty
love what
scary.
You wrote about that, actually.
You saw the post?
I did see the post, and I love that you said, firstly, we've all got to be on the same team. We don't all have to agree on everything. In the same way that we all identify differently as Jews, we don't have to come out in support of Israel and Jews in the same way. I really, really loved that point. But right now, we all need to say something. It may not be the perfect thing, but it's better than nothing. And I respect anyone right now, especially in Hollywood, who has the courage to come and speak out, because their livelihood is at risk.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. I'm in touch with a very kind of like a household name Hollywood figure that I won't bring up. That this person was said something and it was misinterpreted, and this person was pretty much overnight cancelled. But not only cancelled by the people, but cancelled by this person's own
network?
Team.
Wow. Oh wow!
Yeah, because they're afraid. They're afraid. There's so much fear, and then this person has gone through a very traumatizing time to try and get their career back in a short amount of time. It's been a few months, but the consequences of speaking up are devastating. So I agree. I think that anyone who, look, I'm not talking about the haters. I'm not talking about the people who are being highly, highly irresponsible with some comments they make about us, about Israel. But in Ben Stiller's case, I think we should be celebrating and encouraging more people to speak up and not do the opposite. And this is an important thing that I think a lot of people don't spend time to think of. If our allies see that we are divided and shitting on each other when no one is saying the perfect thing according to anyone else, and no one is saying it at the perfect time according to anyone else, then they're like, well, why would we, think about it. Just like, who are we allying ourselves with? If we don't show strength and unity and resolve as a community, then who would want to side with that community? And I think that's something that the Jewish world really needs to think about. You're not doing what you're doing to have allies, but not being aligned internally and understanding what the bigger picture is does send a message, and it's the wrong message. So we need unity. I don't know how we got to start. Oh, we got talking about Ben Stiller because we were talking about celebrities that are coming out and speaking up.
Yeah, and also talking about just the idea of, we were talking about just being able to say something even if it's not the perfect thing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big problems is that most people just don't understand what's going on with this conflict or with any of the past conflicts or the history. I actually think if people would just educate themselves a bit more, they would feel more confident speaking out. They don't want to speak out because they're scared to say the wrong thing, but they actually don't know what they're talking about or what's going on. So I also think we need some kind of information stream where people are just getting the facts. You know, people don't even understand that Hamas is the enemy, not Israel. You know, they don't understand that this is not about Israel fighting a defensive war. It's about a terrorist organisation that started this. And people don't get that. They just listen to the binary narrative that they've been fed and they don't want to go against it.
So wait, so what's our, I mean, as Jewish people, what's our failure there?
Our failure there is not owning our own story and not owning our narrative and not sharing our narrative successfully.
And whose fault is that?
That's all our faults. It is all our faults because you've got to ask yourself, how have the Palestinians been or how has Iran and Qatar done such a brilliant job with the BDS movement, the pro-Palestinian movement? How have they infiltrated every Western university campus? How have they got into the entire arts sector? How? A paid campaign, a paid, organised, structured, strategic campaign over a 25-year period. This is not something that just happened. This has been hard work and they've done a really good job.
Yeah, I'll break it down for the people listening and to distill it to one word, which we agree on, which is vision. They have a vision. And I think our failure is that with the establishment of the State of Israel over the last 75 years, we kind of became lazy. I think Iron Dome is a great metaphor for not laziness, but it's a great metaphor because you kind of become complacent sometimes. You get too comfortable.
I don't know. A lot of people say that they think we were lazy, and maybe we were lazy, but I think what we were was insular. I think that Israel has always been so focused on domestic defence that they have not thought about this, and the Jewish world hasn't thought about this in a much bigger way. And I think that's where we've also gone wrong, that we've been so focused on the one little bit of land instead of focusing on a much, much bigger picture, and instead of focusing on our enemy and the fact that there are many ways to skin a cat. You know, I mean, it's so surprising to me that even the bomb shelters here on October 7, you couldn't open any doors to get people out because no one ever assumed that there would be terrorists who came by foot on, you know.
So I'll push back. I think it is complacency and laziness. I do.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about Israel, the government, because there's left wing, there's right wing, there's center. I mean, there've been lots of governments. I'm also talking about Jewish leadership. I'm talking about the organizations. I think that we've become lazy and complacent in the same way that Iron Dome has made us complacent. Thank God for Iron Dome. I'm not dissing Iron Dome. What I'm saying is, like, when you have a technological miracle like Iron Dome, and it saves your ass, like 10,000 rockets from Hamas. You know how many people would have died if we didn't have Iron Dome? And I'm telling you, as someone who is running to the bomb shelters on a regular basis over the last 10 years, it's just, I feel, okay, I'm protected. Now, what happened on October 7th? There was a border that was being monitored and troops had been moved and everything, and we were caught unprepared and tragedy struck. But there was no one watching. It was like we just took for granted what we had. And to me, at least with my children, and I always kind of like bring up my children as an example and the type of dad that I'm trying to be, which is like, don't take anything for granted. Appreciate what you have daily. Say thank you to your mother, you know, say thank you to your friends, say thank you to your family. Appreciate verbally because it's an action. It keeps things front of mind. It's a value system. And I think what we did was we got, and again, I'm not saying this as a criticism because I agree with you. It's all of our fault. It's my fault as well. We got comfortable, we got lazy, we got complacent, and our enemies did not. And the failure, though, and this is what I've been saying for a long time because I've been advocating for 15 years as well, also like you, sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes, you know, publicly, our enemies have had a vision. And after Israel was established, we needed to protect ourselves. But the vision kind of, I think, started kind of like, okay, well, we've got it. It's in the bag. We've got Israel. The Jewish people have a homeland. And we now need a new vision again. I think, and we don't have that leadership. And this is not to make people hopeless because I think that we've woken up. But we need vision again. And the vision to me is who are we? What is our place in the world? What are we fighting for? And to me, it's not about Israel. It really isn't. It's about Jewish people. It's about being Jewish. And what we're seeing around the world right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, it's like it's way beyond, like Israel is the excuse.
I agree with you 100%. And that's why I say I think we've been insular. We've only focused on Israel and domestic security, and we haven't taken enough time to look at our global narrative and who we are as a people and how we survive as a people. Because if we want to continue the story of the Jewish people, it's a continuum, and it's always been about survival. And we didn't preempt the next step. And that's what you're saying. I think we're both saying similar things in different ways. We didn't preempt where we would be at now. Not only did we not preempt October 7, which is a huge failing, but we did not preempt the level of global anti-Semitism that would erupt as a result of that. And that is a massive failing, because I feel like it's really messy now.
So what can we do about it?
You tell me. What can we do? I
think we need to get some. I can tell you. I think that we need to get some of the Jewish organizations in a room, get them all together, and give them a dose of reality. And the reality is not. I think Jewish organizations are trying to help in many, many different ways right now. But one thing that they're not investing in, and Israel is not investing in, and we've talked about this, is narrative. And narrative is so critical, because narrative can literally save lives. It can change lives. It can change people's perceptions. It can bring on board an ally. It can push an ally away. And it's not just storytelling for the sake of storytelling. There's truth. And if you remain silent, too silent, then eventually your enemies are going to they're going to take advantage of that. And I've said this before as a branding expert, as someone who's been doing branding for almost 30 years, it's like if you have a company and you don't invest in narrative, you might have the best technology in the world, you might have the best product ever. But if you don't own it and you don't reinforce and you don't constantly put your message out there for people to see it, then your enemies, i.e. the competition, will bury you in time.
I think that's one of the problems. I think there are organisations or individuals who would think that they are creating and disseminating narrative. But the problem is, if we look at the Jewish people as a company, we don't have one board or one body or one cohesive organisation telling the narrative and creating the narrative. Everyone's scrambling to do their own thing, and we need cohesion. We actually need Jewish cohesion.
We need cohesion, and that requires leadership and vision. And so a lot of people come to people like you and me and all the other kind of like advocates out there that are kind of in our Jewish world, a lot of people are looking to for hope. And I keep saying the same thing. It's like, ultimately, narrative is critical, but you need leadership, because narrative in a vacuum means that what is happening now is going to keep happening. People are scrambling. We're going to go round and round in circles. But when you have vision, when you have leadership, when you have a Jewish collective that comes together with a very kind of defined goal of what it is we need to do, then you can figure out, well, this is what we need to say, and this is how we need to say it, and this is who we need to say it to, and this is when we need to say it, and all the time, day in, day out, all the time, and to make that a priority.
I'm smiling and almost laughing, because I think there are people who recognise this and who are trying to do this, who are trying to create structures and organisations where they bring everybody into the same umbrella. But I bet you there's like 100 people trying to do that thing in 100 different ways. And that's, where we continue to fail, is not having a single vision in terms of leadership where we're all doing the same thing in the same way.
Which is very difficult, because at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about the Jewish people, we're very pluralistic people. We have, the whole 2 Jews, 3, what was the thing?
Yeah, 3 opinions.
Yeah, it was like a Yiddish feminist on Instagram who I just spent the day with, as you know, putting up some street art. She put something up there. I don't know if it was hers or something that she heard, but it was 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 1 heart. Mm. And I think that what we need is a heart to lead.
Yeah.
the metaphor, the example I'm using consistently is we need a Steve Jobs or a Steve Jobs type, because what he did was he had vision, and he didn't do it on his own, but he got the best. He got the best of the best on his team, the best at PR, the best at R&D, the best branding, the best product development, the best software development, the best retail, the best of the best. But the vision was, he had a vision. And it's not a democracy. Like, who makes the call?
I was just going to say, like, who's the one whose vision we trust and take on? And, it's like all the Jewish egos probably think that they can do it best, but who steers the ship?
So this is interesting. Like, okay, I haven't talked about this on camera before. Sorry, I haven't talked about this in a conversation before, but I'll say it. Let's say you get a team together. You're going to need billions of dollars, right? Okay, so let's just say, I'll just pick someone. I got Robert Kraft. Yeah, I don't know him, but does he get to call the shots because he's got the money?
No, but he gets to potentially choose who calls the shots.
But you see how fucked up that is,
yeah.
Though? And that's the problem. It's just like, what starts first? And I think it's the person that gets it. It's the person that gets it that needs to steer the ship, and the person that knows how to manage everything that he needs to steer that ship, or she needs to steer that ship. And give me your money. And give me your money so I can make it happen, because you need the resources. And that's kind of like, I think, where we need to be going, and to embrace that, because it's like a company. I see it all the time, by the way, with I'll give a very simple example. Sometimes you present the work, and it comes to the logo. Let's just say, use that as an example. And the CEO is there with his team, or she is there with her team. And you want to, okay, well, which logo? And you can see the CEO that wants to get everyone's opinion, and then it's very democratic. Or the CEO that has a real vision, because they know what they're going for. They created the company, they have the vision, and they're open to input, but they know, they absolutely know. And I think that's what we need. We need to look for those people. And I don't know who it is. And we don't have time to waste, and we just have to keep going, which we're doing. But narrative in a vacuum, it has to answer a vision. And to me, the vision is the Jewish people, now and forever. And Israel is part of that.
And how do you feel about the fact that the opposing narrative that's come from the pro-Palestinian world is so well funded, and that they have so many more Muslim people in their communities, and that they are just so much better resourced than we are? Like, how do we compete with that? Even when you look online, if you look at the pro-Palestinian post that you'll find in a day versus the pro-Israel post, there's no comparison in terms of the numbers.
It's funny how all of a sudden you're asking me the questions. That was good.
Sorry. You know what? You can teach me a lot.
No, that's fine. What I like about this is just like it's a conversation. This is perfect. I think it's a number of things. I think that the Jewish people are an incredible people. I'm not saying that because I'm Jewish. I'm saying that because I look at our achievements, and it's not like, oh wow, we're amazing. But I really am very proud to be Jewish, not because I'm Jewish. I'm proud to be Jewish because I look at the people I come from and what we've managed to achieve. So I think that we have the right values, we have moral clarity, and we have ethically. I think that we're there. We're also educated in terms of a culture. It's very important, education. Hard work is also very important. And there's not many of us. And when there's not many of you have a lot to lose. And when you have a lot to lose, you have to fight. And when you're in a corner, you fight. And there's a lot at stake for the Jewish people. But we're fucking great. I mean, we're strong, we're resilient, we're smart, we're talented. We're so talented. We love life. We immerse ourselves in our communities that are non-Jewish. We contribute to society. I think we've got all the right stuff. What we don't have is knowing that, which is what, as you know, I'm trying to remind people of who we are all the time. And we don't really have a vision yet again, a revision. And maybe that's the first time I've ever thought that. It's like we need a revision. Compared to the enemies that we have are being led by a lot of radicals. They don't have much skin in the game. They're living all over the world. They have their countries. They have nothing really. I mean, it's not like they're in a corner. If they had to fight, would they? I mean, maybe, but what are you fighting for? You're fighting for maybe Islam or some perverted form of Islam, radical Islam. I think that our job is to unite internally, the way that we've been discussing, but also by uniting internally with our values and our shared values with our allies to also show our allies that we're kind of on the same page. And when I say allies, I also mean moderate Muslims.
100%.
I mean, Muslims who are speaking up right now that are actually not moderate. They're speaking up about what they don't like about their religion, because it's not about being Jewish. It's about values, and good values transcend all religions and all faiths. Like, there are beautiful Muslim people, there are beautiful Jewish people, there are beautiful Jewish Christians, there are beautiful Christians, and there are beautiful. And I think that unite internally, unite with your allies, and then unite with the people on the other side who are trapped, maybe.
That's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
But it's generations. It's going to be decades of work. And that goes back to like how complacent we were.
Yeah.
That's something that we should have been doing from day one, all the time, until today, and from today. Always, always, always. Why? Because we're a minority. But that's a really long answer to your question.
Okay. No, it's a hard one in terms of the things that we should have always been doing, because it goes back to leadership and a lack of leadership and no one wanting to take responsibility for the fact that we needed to do those things.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, because I always try and be honest, but I'm at the same time, I mean, I'm hopeful, but what about you? How do you feel about, we're in the shits right now, but how do you feel about hope?
I have so much hope. I feel sad every day, but hopeful on the flip side, because we were naive if we thought we could go through history without entering a period like this again. I mean, this is just, the bell curve of anti-Semitism and problems. There's always a rise, and when it falls, we're still around. We've always survived, and we actually go on to thrive. And I've had so many encounters with people who have come back to their Judaism, or who are seeing their Judaism in a different way, who are engaging in communities in different ways. I think there is so much hope in terms of the strength of our people, and a strength that we maybe haven't even had for a long time because we've been complacent. So I'm really hopeful, and I'm excited to see actually where the Jewish people go.
Yeah, I think that the one silver lining, and it's a huge price to have paid for it, obviously, is that people are this aspect of community, which we're all feeling, even around the hostages, like you're here in Israel right now, and it's still around 100 hostages, and we're still fighting for them. We're still talking about them. That's our community. We're trying, everyone's trying to bring them home. And it's not just Israelis, it's the Jewish people around the world.
I wish you could see what goes on in Australia.
Tell me.
In Australia, in terms of talking about the hostages and not letting the stories fade or die. Even if I think about, I've been here for a couple of days, but if I think about the week before I left and the functions that were happening, there was, through United Israel Appeal and Karen Hayesod, a group that came out with, they had a virtual reality thing where people in the community could put goggles on, and it was as if they were at the Nova Music Festival or as if they were at Kibbutz Be'eri. We had a function where we had 2 Nova Music Festival survivors come and talk. One was a Muslim Arab Israeli policeman. He was a security guard. Not even a Jewish guy. Just really, we are fighting so hard in our communities to stand with Israel, with the Jewish people, and with the hostages.
Well, I can tell you as an Israeli that I feel I've met a lot of Australians, There was a group of women that came here. I can't remember the name of the...
They were a UIA women's group.
Right, and so they reached out and they asked if I could come and just meet them and talk to them. And they really lifted me. I mean, I don't think that they know that, but they were like, thanking me. And I'm like, no, it's just like, they really lifted me and they helped me. And I feel that community support. And in Australia specifically, and this is a thing that really, I would love to come, we've spoken about, I would love to come to Australia. One, because I just want to come and support, and I just want to, to give whatever it is that I can give, but also to get.
I'd love you will come to Australia, you just will. But what I'd love you to see are our Jewish communities and why they are so special. And there are a couple of reasons why they're so special.
Tell me.
Australia had the largest community of Holocaust survivors, only second to Israel after the Holocaust. So most of us were raised by Holocaust survivor grandparents or parents. So that already gives us a very unique connection to the Jewish world. The other thing is that we have really committed Zionist communities, and a lot of our kids, a high percentage of our kids are sent to Jewish day schools, and those schools run incredible Israel programs. So a lot of Australian kids have spent a lot of time in Israel, and they are hugely Zionistic. And the other thing is that unlike America, we don't send our kids off to university in other cities and states. Our kids pretty much stay home, so they're still really involved in the communities. I mean, some people say it's not a great thing because maybe it's a bit insular, but it does do a lot to build really robust, strong communities and great Jewish continuity.
I had no idea about the Holocaust survivors and Australia, but it doesn't surprise me because the Australians that I've met, I feel community. I feel community. I feel like we're all in this together. And I would love to come. I would absolutely love to come and just kind of like be a part of that. But it ties back to what you said about Jewish community. That we're one people, and Australia is at the end of the bloody earth. It's just like, and I really I feel you guys. And
but something amazing. Like, we're one people, but for a long time, and I've probably done in my life maybe 10 trips to Israel. For a long time, I think diaspora Jews have felt when they're in Israel that Israelis don't necessarily see the diaspora Jews as one people. But the last time I was here, which was only 6 weeks ago, it's the most questions I've ever had from Israelis about anti-Semitism in the diaspora. And it's the first time that I have truly felt that Israelis see themselves or see us as part of them. And that was like my biggest takeaway from my last trip, and it was like the most amazing feeling.
That's the silver lining. I mean, I own a branding agency for some people that don't know, and we did the branding for the Jewish Agency for Israel, which is one of the biggest Jewish organizations in the world. And the reason that we did it was because they needed to get their story right, and they needed to evolve their story and also their visual identity and everything. But part of it was because there was a huge rift between the diaspora Jews and Israel, and a lot of it is because of politics, because there's a right-wing government and then a very, very left-wing Jewish democratic support base in the States, and it was this there was a divide. And listen, in Israel, in terms of our failure, is I'm not a typical Israeli because I grew up in Hong Kong, I grew up in London, I came here, I served in the army, I did my first degree here, I lived in New York, I lived in Boston, and I came back 15 years ago. So I'm Israeli, I was born here, I'm an Israeli, I speak Hebrew like everyone else, but I'm very, very international. And I see how important, I've always seen how important it is to speak up for the Jewish people abroad as an Israeli, but also as a Jewish person abroad to speak up for Israel. And on October 8th, I put out a message which was just like everyone was reaching out to me and saying, we're here for you. And I said, I'm here for you because I knew what was coming. With my advocacy experience, I could see what was coming. And this idea of more alignment. Look, October 7th shook a lot of Israelis up because of the type of people also that were attacked. Yeah. And I think that this is important to say. for the people who are not Jewish and who don't know, but the people that were attacked at the Nova Festival, the kibbutzim that were around Gaza that were attacked, the music festival was completely left-wing, hippie peaceniks. I mean, that lived for peace and coexistence. And the same thing with the kibbutzim around the area, that they wanted peace so much. So it shattered a bit of a dream for Israelis. But the thing that I spoke to Mia Talias earlier about, who's a guest on the podcast, was when they came across the border, these jihadist Hamas fucks, okay, they weren't saying kill Israelis. They were saying Yehud. They were going for the Jews. And Israelis, I think, now realize that it's not just about Israel. For the first time in a long time, they realize it's about being Jewish. And whether you're Jewish or not, practicing or not, you're still Jewish. If they can kill those people who are just, consider themselves Israelis and are for peace and want a free Palestine, and if they can kill those people so horrifically.
Well, even, to that point, with the guy who I heard speak in Sydney last week, the Muslim Israeli policeman, he said that they came into the Nova Music Festival site and they just killed everybody. He saw a pregnant woman in a hijab shot multiple times. It's not even just Jews. It's anyone who is an enemy of radical Islam. If you're a Muslim and you are standing on Israeli soil, you're going to go as well. And that's what I wish some of our non-Jewish allies or potential allies understood, that it's not even just about Jews. It's not just about Israel.
Not at all.
It's really just about anyone who is not aligned with their philosophy.
Yeah, and you don't need to. You can look at the London bus bombings. You can look at the Spain bombings. You can look at France. You can look at 9/11. You can look at what happened in Afghanistan between ISIS and the people of Afghanistan. You can look at
Russia
Syria
last week in a church.
Yeah, this has got nothing to do with Jewish people. It's the excuse. It's the veil that they're throwing over the head. It is something that people need to know. Okay, we need to wrap, but I have to ask you a couple of questions. And on a lighter note, and not to put you on the spot, and not to say that whoever you don't mention, it doesn't mean that you don't like them, because I am putting you on the spot. But who do you like to follow online? Who gives you strength right now in this fight right now? Like advocates. Who are the people that you like? The people that rise to the top. And that doesn't mean that the people you don't mention, you don't like them either. We know.
There's so many. I follow all of them. I love Melissa Chapman because she lifts everyone up. And she posts and shares everything and she covers everything. And I love that about her as a person.
She's generous.
She's just generous and she's real, and her page is it comes from the purest place, and I love that. I love Amanda Markowitz because she has such a connection to the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, and she's the granddaughter of 4 grandparents who were killed in the Holocaust. So I sort of really connect with her content on that level, because I'm also the grandchild of grandparents who left Poland before the Holocaust. Who else do I love? Some of the people that can bring humour into this shit fight, I really appreciate.
Like who?
Like even that comedian Modi, is that his name? He's not a.
Oh, Modi. Yeah, I don't know his last name, but he's funny.
Yeah, he's really funny. I just sometimes find I like a bit of light Jewish relief.
Yeah. I like Elon Gold, by the way.
Elon Gold?
He's great. I've met him as well. He's a super nice guy.
Lee Kern is really funny.
Lee Kern is funny.
Yeah, there's so many people. There are so many people. And then I love, Douglas Murray and the non-Jewish people who just make sense. Like some of the journalists in Australia, Gemma Tognini, who works for The Australian, who just sees things as they actually are. I really respect those type of people.
And I also like, just if we're on the subject of people who are not Jewish, the people, the Muslims who are speaking up, or the Arabs that are really very, very bravely speaking up for their own communities, which is something that I don't think enough Jewish people realize maybe or stop to think about, but they should think about it. And I can name a lot of people. But anyone who comes from the region that knows what radical Islam is all about, that understands the hate that goes along with being raised in that environment, which leads to this intolerance and this violent rhetoric, which is ultimately then physical violence, they're taking great risks.
They are, and they're amazing. I wish more people could hear them. I really do.
Well, I can tell you that I'm making a couple of films now, and I have already with Ellie, and we're trying to celebrate them. We're trying to and so I'd suggest that for all of us. But I think it's great. But the most important thing for me right now is to take two things. One is, we don't even remember how we met. We know that we met online, but I think everyone should follow you for a couple of reasons. One is because you get it. You're mature, you're seasoned, you're a veteran, you're outspoken, and you're actually really funny. Your posts are really funny, and they're very, very true. And I'm a huge fan of yours, So I'm a massive fan. I think everyone should follow you. So can you just tell me, so that people know where to find you?
On Instagram at Marnie Perlstein.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. I'm a single, I'm on Facebook, but don't even bother. I'm just at this stage, learning my way around technology and expanding my platforms. But for now, Instagram's where you'll find me.
Yeah, and I think, that's where I found you, and you're just doing great work. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and that we've actually become, friends. We really are.
Speaking of silver linings.
Yeah, silver lining. Thank you, Marnie.
I'm also so grateful. Thank you. And thank you for everything. You've been incredibly good to me. And that's a big kiss.
Big kiss back to you. Thank you, Marnie. Well, that's it. Thank you for joining me on I'm That. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and I hope you'll join me for our next guest. In the meantime, definitely hit subscribe, whether you're on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, or any other platform. And if you can, leave a comment, give it a like, and tell your friends. That would be brilliant. Stay tuned for the next show, and see you soon.